Hi everyone, my name is Laura Gannon. I'm the Education and Training Officer at WorkLINC. This session is a CV workshop called Putting the Pieces Together, and it's part of our wider community education programme, Career Shomra. The goal of this session is just to go through the basics of a CV, just to help women in the community with putting those pieces together and making sure that you're giving yourself the best possible shot if you are either applying for a job or changing career, or just really looking to kind of take a look at your CV again for the first time in a little while and aren't sure where to start. These things can kind of change a little bit over time. So I just thought it might be important to have a video here that you could watch at your own time that goes through everything. And of course, if you do have any questions, you can reach me at laura@linc.ie. And just to be aware that I do one-to-one support with the community. So if you are looking for support with your CV, that's absolutely no problem. Just reach out and we can help you with that. So I'm going to get started with the presentation, and then I will talk through it. This shouldn't take any more than maybe 20-25 minutes, so hopefully not too much of your time. And yeah, so I'll just... Okay. So the first section of the CV is the basics. This can be, something that people kind of skim over quite quickly, but actually these things change quite a bit, and there's a lot of misconceptions around what should be on it and what shouldn't. So just to go through it here, things I would always say to definitely put on the very top of your CV would be your name, your contact email, your phone number, your LinkedIn profile URL, so the link to your LinkedIn profile, links to any other employment profile, professional pages. So say, for example, if you're in marketing or you're in graphic design and you have an online portfolio, or for example, if you are in tech and you have pages that you've built that are yours, that you could showcase your work, I would always link to those as well. So anything really that kind of links to the work you've done that you could showcase, that always put that in there as well. Things I would not put in a CV: so date of birth, your full address. So it's always advisable to put your city down so that your employer has an idea of the city you're based in, but there's absolutely no need to put in your full address. Photograph, no. Marital status, no. Nationality, no, unless it's specifically affected by a visa status and it's relevant to applications. So in some cases, you might be somebody who is in Ireland with a visa, and depending on your visa, it might have a direct impact on the kind of work you can do or the amount of hours you can do. So I know if you are on a stamp 4 visa, for example, you are fully entitled to work full time. However, different visas such as maybe stamp 1 or stamp 2, you may be only entitled to work a limited number of hours per week. So that's always relevant to you if you are applying for something to kind of share that with the employer so that they can ensure that your, I suppose, your availability is in line with what they're looking for. Other sensitive information I would not put down: PPS number, things like that. We forget sometimes that we are sending our CV, a lot of the times we're uploading it to different portals, we're sending it to emails. This is all very sensitive information, and we do need to be conscious of that. So none of this this information is really relevant to your ability to to obtain the work. It's not information that anybody needs when you're at the application process, maybe further down the line if you're successful, but for the most part there's absolutely no reason to put any of those on the top of your profile. So another yes would be additional awards, voluntary work achievements. Again, this shows, a potential employer, anything you might have done outside of your work remit that might be relevant. But then on the no side, nothing that's not directly relevant to your work or skill set. So again, just really making sure that you're conscious of the sensitive information you're sharing, your marital status, your what you look like, unless you're applying to go on the catwalk, doesn't really matter. So just think, do they need this information? And if not, leave it out. So I would always just say the absolute basics that you should have there are your full name, your contact email and phone number, your LinkedIn profile URL if you have one, and links to any other employment profiles. So just moving on then to getting the order right. So with your CV and your profile, it should always fall in a certain order. This is for a lot of different reasons, but if you are a hiring manager or a recruiter and you are, looking for someone with a very specific qualification or skill set, what you want to be able to see very kind of top in the profile, particularly if you're dealing with a high volume of the CVs, is first of all, is this person qualified? So a lot of people make the mistake of putting your education and qualifications down the end of the CV. And really they should be right up the top. So again, you need to clarify straight out the gate, I'm qualified for this, I have the qualification, I have the education, I have the training, professional membership. So you'd start with your personal details at the top. So that would be your name, your contact information. Then you would have a short profile underneath that. So that's usually about 4 to 5 sentences. And that's something I'll cover a little bit more, a little bit further down the slides. As I said, then education, qualifications, trainings, professional memberships, IT skills and languages, they would all come next. So if you're putting in your education, whether it's your college or, if you've got any kind of, if you're studying to be an accountant, you have ACCA membership or anything along those lines, you need to put in the date that you started and completed or just completed your education, the establishment or the institution that you attended, and what your qualification was. Similar enough with your professional memberships, when you either started and completed or just completed, what the name of the body is, the accrediting body, and what your qualification was. Similar to that, down a little bit further, you can have your IT skills and languages. So if you're someone who works in tech and you have Python and, you have different tech coding languages, they need to be kind of put fairly high at the top so that if you're applying for tech roles, they can see, yes, this person can code in the language we need. And similarly, if you have, IT skills, whether that's Microsoft Office or, anything in that realm that you feel might be relevant, that needs to go in as well. From there, you would go through your employment history. We'll cover the order of that a little bit further down. And then down towards the bottom, after you've got your employment history filled in, you would have your additional information. So again, awards, volunteering, and references. So they would be down the very end. So the order would be personal details, a profile, which would be 4 to 5 sentences, your education, qualifications, and professional memberships, your employment history, and then additional information. So the next section is, what is a profile and why do I need it? So your profile is about 4 to 5 sentences, and really what it is just a nutshell on who you are, what you bring to the table, and what you're seeking going forward. So it's not necessarily just about, looking forward or looking back. It's a little bit of both. It's really to show a kind of synopsis, and I would always say to think of it as the back of a book. You're only able to kind of fit a small description about a whole book at the back, and it's really about condensing that information and delivering that in your profile. And again, just important to look ahead as well as backwards. So the 4 to 5 sentences shouldn't just solely focus on what you've done in the past. It should be what you're kind of looking to do going into the future as well. The next thing I would say, and this is really important, and this is really common when you're looking at profiles and CVs all the time, is choose your tense and stay there. Don't speak in third person. You are not Morgan Freeman. So a lot of the time, for some reason in profiles, you tend to see people jumping from different tenses or, going from past to present to, so whatever tense you're going to speak in, you need to kind of pick it and stay there. Don't refer to yourself or speak about yourself or write about yourself in the third person. So, this is your document. You've clearly written this, or you've clearly informed this document. So there's no need to talk about it from a third person perspective. You can use current and present and personal tense, such as I, am, I can, that's really the kind of language you need to be focused in on there. So moving on. So filling the gap. So this is a really common area of work that I focus on with a lot of people. A lot of people get quite stressed out about gaps in their CV, understandably, because we have to explain then. But I would also say not to be too afraid of that. I think in today's current work climate, we are a lot more, I suppose, aware and conscious of people's lives taking different shapes and forms, and life happening to people. So the level of kind of formality that we would have dealt with, and that kind of real kind of veneer of professionalism that we were never able to look past maybe a few years ago, there is a little bit more, I suppose, room there for personal, that whole view of your situation. So again, very common that I would work with women who maybe had taken time out to raise children, and would have, not really known where to start when kind of coming back to their CV. So first of all, I would always say it's not illegal. It's not frowned upon to take a career break for any reason, whether that's for your own personal choices, whether that's to raise a family, whatever it might be. A lot of the time it's people that maybe need to be a carer to a parent themselves. So, none of these things are unprofessional. That's life. That's how it works. So I would always say to kind of embrace those areas, and instead of trying to kind of dance around them or hide them or explain them away, it's generally the less you lie, the less you have to remember. So it's just really about being honest, but also framing it in a way that kind of makes sense to the overall document, and that you'd be comfortable to discuss in the interview. But you're also not legally obliged or in any way obliged to disclose information that you don't feel like sharing. Again, as I just mentioned there, parenthood on your CV. I would always include parenthood on the CV, and this is for a couple of different reasons. It's not a negative. It's not, you haven't been on holiday. And there are huge amounts of skills involved in being a parent that are very transferable to a professional environment. I don't know many people who are more, organized or capable of multitasking than parents. There are a lot of skills and things that you learn to do as a parent, with your children, with your family in your home, that make a very valuable contribution to a professional environment as well. So I would always say, if you can even just acknowledge those things and say, it might be a case that you were out of work for, away from the professional kind of environment for maybe about 2 years. So it's just saying, in this time I was, with my family. And you can talk a little bit about, I suppose, the skills you developed in that time, and how they might be useful in a working environment, because you are learning, you are gaining skills, you are working hard, you are, just not getting paid, essentially. So always include that if you can, if you're comfortable. But again, you're also under no obligation to share that. I think there is a bit of a move away as well from that kind of prodding and poking of, what's with this gap and what were you doing? And people are a little bit more conscious of boundaries and things like that now. Not everywhere and not all the time, and not as much as it should be, but at the same time, I think we are a little bit more human in our approach to these things now, and the understanding that life is not completely linear, and life happens. And I think including certain things in your CV is really important, because it's just easier to kind of say, well, this is what I was doing, and these are the things I learned, and this is why these things will be useful to your business or your organization. And then just to move on to the next point, that framing is everything. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So again, it's you could just put down 2016, 2018, stay-at-home parent, move on. However, you could include 2 to 3 sentences that says, during this time I was a stay-at-home parent with my children, or with my child, and kind of go through the process of maybe some things you learned, but also kind of at what point maybe you thought it was time to come back and why, you were motivated to come back. And that might be purely financial, that's fine. But it's really a lot of the things on your CV is not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So framing is everything, and how you're putting that picture in a frame is really, really important. Okay. So the next part is around formatting and design. So this can be a bit tricky, because I suppose the world we live in is not as singular maybe as it used to be, and the world of work particularly is a lot broader, particularly when we look at things like tech and pharma, and how the professional landscape has expanded, and everybody is looking for something else. And it's very hard to know, 10, 15 years ago, we were very much like, this is the CV template. This is it was very black and white. It was very much, this is what you use. And again, given what field you're in, it might make a difference to the formatting. But generally speaking, I would always kind of give the following pointers just around the basic formatting. So the first thing I would always say when you're listing your employment history. So you would have, say, September 2014 to current, then you would have the job type, the job, and then you would have the job title. You don't need to put necessarily, say previous to that, you don't have to put, when you're going further back, the months for everything. So after, you've covered your previous role or your most recent role, previous to that, you might have 15, 20 years experience. You don't have to remember, was it May 1987 or was it June 1987? Don't stress about it. Just put the years. Like past a certain point, months are really not that relevant. So the next thing I would say is list your tasks and responsibilities in order of how much your workload that they accounted for. So when you are developing your CV or updating your CV, always start with the tasks and responsibilities that were the most demanding of your time, or that were your main responsibilities, and then move down from there. Or that you had to, the order might be that where you had to prioritize your work. So always start with the kind of largest piece. So for example, if you're a data entry administrator working, in a temp office for a little while, and you're predominantly doing data entry, but sometimes you might have to order the stationery, or you might have to answer the phones, or you might have to do work the reception for an hour every 2 days. Always make sure that initially, the first thing you write down is your data entry and that task and kind of what that involved. And then as your duties kind of, the less time they account for, the further down they go on the document. Do not forget projects, other teams you may have assisted, and any additional duties you took on outside of your remit. It's so easy when we are updating our CVs to just look at our, just to think of our jobs as, again, that kind of two-dimensional, these are my tasks. But a lot of the time in a working environment, you're maybe working on a side project with a team, or you might be supporting another member of staff that's new, or it's very likely that you've taken on, whether they're large or small, additional responsibilities outside of your remit. So obviously I wouldn't be putting it in if one time you answered the phone for Jenny the receptionist because she had an extra long lunch break. No, I wouldn't be putting that in. But if there are things that you feel would shine a light on maybe additional skills you have that are not reflected in the data entry part, absolutely. And it also shows that you are flexible and that you are adaptable, and everything tells a story. So no matter how small it might seem to you or how inconsequential it might seem, these little things tell a potential employer so much about your ability to not just do the main tasks you were assigned, but how flexible is this person? Can they move from a very kind of data-driven task to helping with something that's a bit more people-orientated? What does that tell them about you? So again, if you've assisted with projects or done any additional work, make sure you have a think about that, because often we just think about, well, this is my job details or my job description. And we don't think of, like, actually, when we sit down and think back on our time in that role, did I take on extra work? Did I assist another team with something that gave me maybe a new skill or gave me a new insight into something? Have a think about that, because, what we often forget with CVs is that the people we're sending to have never met us. We know who we are and what we're capable of and what we've done and how we've contributed to other environments. But we forget sometimes when we send the CV to someone that, yes, they will read the CV, but they don't know who you are. They don't know who you are with your shoes off. They don't know what you're about. They don't know what you stand for. All they have in front of them is this document. That is it. So you kind of got to leave it all in the field. A lot of people kind of give their CV about 70%. And then go, but when I get to interview, I'll really knock their socks off. There will be no interview if you don't knock their socks off with a CV. So your CV has to be, to me anyway, the way I always look at it is, the CV has to be an absolute knockout, because after, there is no guarantee of a foot in the door otherwise, and you have to kind of think of it that way. So another area I would just say to kind of keep an eye on is technical jargon that's very specific to a place of employment. So look, specifically, let's talk about Cork as an example. I have worked as a recruiter and worked on behalf of many different clients in Cork, hiring and filling roles for them. A lot of these companies would be multinationals, pharma, tech, and they all have their own kind of internal language, technical jargon that they like to use on their job specs and within their places of work, and that's the language that's used, and that's great. But somebody from outside of that organization trying to understand that language, it's mind melting. There's companies I would have recruited for that I could easily, talk and understand and read any job spec they sent me and understand what they meant, because I was accustomed to their language and I'd gotten used to it. But again, if somebody is from outside of that organization or isn't familiar with that, language, then you might as well be drawing in symbols on the page, because it's not translating. So always make sure that you're translating that into layman's terms or accessible language for somebody looking at your CV, that they will understand what that might mean. Other just kind of basic stuff around formatting is just, generally speaking, font size 11. Generally use a clear and easy to read font like Times New Roman or Tahoma. Again, you got to be conscious that yes, people love to have like fancy fonts and things like that, but sometimes they don't read well. They don't a lot of companies now will be uploading your CV through an internal system. And what those systems tend to do is pull the information from your CV and upload it onto their system into like a profile, so that they can create a profile internally on their internal system. And if your CV is unclear, hard to read, the font is not identifiable, it's heavily formatted with boxes and graphics and things like that, it's very, very hard for that to upload or for that to be read from an internal system. So keep things nice and clean and clear, readable. Keep the font size around the 11 mark, so that it's big enough to kind of read, but not taking up too much space. Again, one thing I've left out here, but that you're always trying to obviously do, and I think everybody knows this at this stage, is we're trying to keep, where possible, to 2 pages. Okay, so I'll have a little sip of coffee before we do the tricky bits. Okay, so the tricky stuff. So I just wanted to cover a few things here that, again, from experience doing one-to-ones and doing work in the community, these are kind of things that tend to crop up that people don't really know how to tackle, and that's completely understandable. But might avoid applying for something or avoid doing their CV because they don't want to address these things. So I'm just going to kind of whiz through them, and I would always say, as I said, if you are looking for some support, and this applies to you, definitely link in with me and we can have a more specific conversation to your needs. So change of career. Okay, so this is very, very common, more so again since the pandemic, that people are changing career. They are maybe looking to take a different path, and it's kind of like, where do I start with this? How do I how do I do this? So I would always say focus on your transferable and soft skills. So transferable skills, say for example, you're working in, say you're an accountant, and you are, you're working as an accountant for 10 years, and you decide, you want to move into something different. Well, your transferable skills there are your, your numeracy skills, your attention to detail. It's looking at the things that are, yes, specific to what you were doing, but things you can take with you, things that you can take and apply to something else, and that would help you kind of learn very quickly. A lot of that stuff is, again, looking at the commonalities or, common denominators of what you were doing and how to bring them forward. And the other thing is to look at soft skills. So if you're struggling, or if you're taking a kind of complete change of approach in your career and you're looking to do something completely different, it's focusing on your soft skills, focusing on your, your people skills, your, like, the things that, are not very specific to a qualification, but tell the interviewer or the hiring manager a bit more about who you are as a person, and kind of focus your energy a little bit more on that. Also, to identify the motivation for change. So a lot of people, again, are a little bit terrified talking about these things, but really, again, since the pandemic, that this is extremely, extremely common. And I think just even by acknowledging and identifying the motivation for change, or, why you're looking to change, and not that it's just a case that you're like jumping from here to here, which is also fine. That's, people have to try on different things for size and figure out what fits. But if you are, say, for example, in an established field for a set number of years or a set number of time, and all of a sudden you are taking kind of quite an extreme sharp turn in a different direction, it's really just about saying, I wasn't, it's identifying and framing in as professional language as possible, that, what your motivation for the change was. It might be that you just didn't find the work rewarding anymore and you wanted to do something a bit more fulfilling. You might have found that it might be a case that, physically you can't do the work. Like, there's a huge amount of very laborious, hard, backbreaking work out there that, unfortunately, after a certain period of time, people can't sustain anymore. So it might be a case that, you say, I'm looking to move into administration role. I've done, physical work for a long time. But unfortunately, this is taking a toll on me physically, and I want to stay in the working world as long as possible. So I'm changing my skill set. Or, it's just being, as I said, honest, but framing it in the right way. Different things work in different sectors, and consistency is important, and it must align with the type of work you're doing. So I can't tell you in a webinar that one size fits all, with whether it's a CV or formatting or layout and things like that, because different things will work in different sectors. If you are in marketing, they want to see your creative side. They want to see how you can think outside the box and make something look, and how you can sell something. Whereas if you're, again, applying to be an accountant, they want to see a good attention to detail. They don't want to see distraction everywhere. They need to know that you can focus in and do the task at hand. So it's important that your CV and your cover note and your profile reflects the work that you do and reflects the industry that you're in. So there will never be a one size fits all, but it has to be consistent and align with what you're doing. If I, for example, was recruiting for a par qualified accountant, or a newly qualified accountant, and I got a CV and it was, color boxes here and bits here, and I'd be a little bit concerned, because, again, it's not to say that accountants are creative, but in the line of work you're doing, the very work itself is focused on kind of clear, concise detail. So you want the document you're handing to your hiring manager or employer, potential employer, to align with the work. So it's just making sure that things match up. If you're selling your creative skills, be creative. It's a game of show, don't tell. So there is no point, if you're in a creative field or in a creative space, there is no point in writing 14 paragraphs on why you're creative. It's really, think about how you can, hold a mirror up to yourself with this document and not just tell them what you're about, but show them what your style is and show them what your vision is. Again, don't, turn it into an absolute work of art, but it just has to be reflective and show, if you're showcase your skills, showcase what you're able to do with a piece of paper and how you're able to, storytelling, how you can tell your own story. If you're a finance professional, again, precision, attention to detail are key. So, it's very much about thinking about, okay, what kind of environment am I going into and what is the kind of main task or what is the main thing they need me to be there? And how can I reflect this in the CV? Okay, so cover letters and supporting statements. So these are used by employers to decide if you have the skills and experience they need. It needs to be, quite kind of to the point, but within that, use that opportunity to kind of use words that are specific to what they need, so that kind of those words stand out. Again, focus less on fitting in and more on standing out. So many people are looking for cover note templates, and I've seen 7 billion of the same cover letter, and it's the same language over and over again, and so many people are focused on, well, I have to do the cover letter to make it look like a cover letter, and actually you're better off focusing on standing out a little bit more, using your own language, making an impression. Because again, if you're talking about a hiring manager that's looking at 100 CVs a day, they're probably looking at about 70 that are the same, and those ones are just going to all kind of melt into each other, and nobody within that is going to stand out. Whereas if you are thinking and more conscious of, how do I speak? How do I, what's my kind of language? How would I describe myself? How do I stand out? That's really where you need to focus in on. And again, using the language in the job spec to inform that letter. So if you're looking at a job spec online and it's saying, we need someone who is, punctual, or we need, whatever language they're using in their, as their kind of top priorities, you need to make sure that's reflected in your cover note, because the cover note, again, is kind of underrated, even though they're not as common anymore. They've just kind of morphed into supporting statements, or, the language has changed, but essentially, they are cover notes. And that's the first stop before the CV. And a lot of the time, if the cover note or the cover letter and the supporting statement is not, it feels like a copy and paste job, or there's nothing in there that really tells you anything about the person outside of the general kind of, I'm this and that, you tend to just kind of whiz by them, and, they just, as I said, they all kind of melt into one. So again, just if you're kind of thinking of where to start and finish, and what the cover notes function is, it's the opportunity to show that you can write clearly and persuasively, that you are enthusiastic and committed, and that you can articulate well. So if you are, setting out to write your cover note, and you take those 3 points, and focusing on them when you're writing your cover letter, you will see a definite difference between that and maybe when you've written previously, because you've got different kind of goals with the letter. So, okay, things to remember. Your CV should be a mirror of your whole self. That's not to say, you give half a page to, like, this is my top 10 favorite films, this is the album of the decade, this is my, but it should definitely be a mirror of your whole self. It should definitely, where possible, not be kind of, as I said, one-dimensional, two-dimensional, that it's just like, it's like a list of, this is what I can do. You're not a robot, you're a human being, and we are a multitude of things. We're very, very complex creatures, and we can be, as we know now, probably more than we did a long time ago. Intelligence is not just, doesn't look one way. We have, multiple different intelligences, and we all have different ways to shine. So it's really just showing who you are, what you're about, what you can do, and where you're looking to go. And that should really be, as I said, that mirror. It can and will make the difference between progressing to interview. So take the time to make sure it represents you and what you can do. Like I said before, sometimes with CVs, we can kind of go, look, it's grand, it's fine, it'll get me in the door, it might get me the interview. What you really want is to be the CV that's top of the pile for the interview. Like, you want to be going in there like candidate number one because your CV was just a knockout. Like, you don't understand really until maybe you're on the other side of it, but that can really make a substantial difference when you are shortlisting candidates to interview. That you know, yes, you need to do, you know, choose people by the skill set and are they meeting the criteria, but personality jumps off a page. And I have had so many experiences where I have just been excited to interview someone, excited to meet them just based on their CV. I've also had people who on paper I thought, okay, well, look, we'll see them and we'll see how we go. They seem to be able to do the job on paper, and then they meet me and they blow me away. And I'm thinking, how did this not come through the page here? Like, how is this person in front of me so much more than they put on the paper? And how many jobs have they missed because this is not matching up? So make sure that you're taking the time, because it will and can make the difference between progressing to interview and not. There are a lot of situations, probably myself included, where had I taken a bit more time with my CV, there might have been a couple more interviews on the table for me. So, you know, it does make a difference. And also then your CV is not a permanent document, so it should always evolve with you and be updated regularly. Oftentimes with our CVs, we leave it for 4 years and start a job and do a job, and then we decide to move on and we go, oh, what do I have to think now, what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and God, there's been so much and I don't know where to start. And I don't always be updating your CV. If you start a new job, you know, within the first 2 months of you doing that job, update the CV to say, this is the job I do. We never know what's going to happen. We never know what's around the corner. We also don't remember. Our memories are not 100% reliable. So as time goes on, you forget things. You mightn't remember, like, oh geez, I helped with this big project. And that might just completely lapse out of your mind after, you know, a year or two. So it's a constantly evolving document. It should be updated regularly. As you know, if you might get a new qualification, put it on there. And then the day you finish, you know, if you get a diploma, open the CV, diploma, date it, get it all in there. And that means that, you know, whether it's by choice or, you know, heaven forbid something happens and you have to apply for work really quickly, you're not starting on the back foot. You're not starting and looking at the document going, oh, I'm allergic to this, I cannot deal. So making sure that you're constantly working on the document. And as I said, the best time to record anything that you're doing is as you're doing it. And then it's always ready. And it's always the most accurate version of what it could be. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this session. I'm just going to move my little camera so we can see here. So again, just to kind of recap, WorkLINC is a project funded through Rethink Ireland's Equality Fund. The aim of WorkLINC is to provide one-to-one support, community education and personal development programs to ensure our community are supported in pursuit of education and professional development. I provide one-to-one support for women in the community, and if that's something you'd like to avail of, whether you're looking at changing careers, going back to work, going to college, just exploring those options, just figuring it out and need a sounding board, that's exactly what I'm here for. My email address, you can contact me anytime directly. It's laura@linc.ie, and my mobile number is 087 063 4137. So I'm just going to stop the share now. I'm back to the screen. So thank you so much for sticking with me there. I hope that was, I hope it was kind of the basics covered off. And as I said, you know, I'm here, I'm available to the community if you need me. So if you're looking to get a CV kind of sorted or starting to look at it again, and you know, are kind of putting it off, drop me a line, send it over, I'll take a look at it. We can get the ball rolling. That's everything from me, and have a lovely day.